The alpha spoken. The alpha spoken.
Sacks feels like he's in a good mood. I like this.
Welcome to the world's greatest podcast. OpenAI launched a bunch of ChatGPT plugins, and I don't know if you saw it, but David Sacks wrote a blog post with ChatGPT. It's an amazing back and forth. I read this back and forth. Explain what you did, Sacks. This was really like one of the best conversations I've seen with ChatGPT. I'll pop it up here on the screen, but explain what you did.
Well, I had an idea for a blog post about the use of a, I guess, tactic you could call give to get. I thought it would be an interesting tactic for AI startups to use if they're trying to get a hold of proprietary training data. So, for example, if you wanted to create an architect AI, you need a lot of plans. Or if you're going to create like a doctor AI, you need a lot of lab results or medical reports to train the AI on. And those are hard to get. OpenAI doesn't necessarily have them yet. So there is an opportunity, I think, for startups to create these AIs in different, you call them professional verticals. So the give to get technique would be you give points to your users for uploading that data, and then they can spend those points by using the AI. And anyway, the company that came up with this give to get tactic was a company called Jigsaw almost 20 years ago. No one remembers this company. I'm kind of dating myself because I remembered it. But I just had this idea, I wonder if the Jigsaw approach could be used for AI startups. So I started by going into ChatGPT and I said, hey, have you heard of Jigsaw? And then it had. And then I said, tell me about its give to get, approach. And then I said, would this approach work for AI startups that want proprietary training data sets? And it said, yes, this is a good idea. And then I gave the architect example and I said, can you give me more examples like this? And it gave me like 20 more examples. And then I asked it just to flesh out various kinds of details. I went down some cul-de-sacs that I didn't use. And then at the end, I said, can you summarize everything we've just talked about in a blog post? And it gave me the first draft of a blog post. I then did a substantial amount of editing on most of the blog post, although some of it I just used verbatim. And then I had a couple of people in my firm look at it. They made some good suggestions. So it's not like the human's completely out of the loop. And then I copy and pasted my edited version back into ChatGPT, said, here's my edit. And then I asked for some suggestions. It made a few small edits. And I said, okay, great, just incorporate the edits yourself, gave me that final output. And then I posted on Substack. A blog that probably would have taken me a week to research and write, if I had done it at all, I was able to do in a day. And I can't see myself going back now. I think this is just how I'm going to write all my blog posts is use ChatGPT as my researcher, as a writing partner, some cases an editor, but I'm definitely going to run it through.
The thing that I was struck by was just how kind and generous and thoughtful this conversation was. And I just thought, I've never seen Sacks have a conversation where he was so kind to the other person and thoughtful. Right about now, all your friends and family are like, how do we get Sacks to have this conversation with us? You were super kind to the AI.
Because it's not a person, it was a robot.
Oh, no, I get it.
Well, just in case it takes over the world, Cal, you can't be too careful. But no, I think, listen, it's important to give the AI.
Look at he's so kind. He's like, perfect.
Look,
Thanks.
perfect.
Thanks.
No,
I've never once gotten a thanks from Sacks.
Well,
when have you ever used an exclamation part?
Scroll up and show that example. The AI actually gave me some information about Jigsaw's point system. Again, the rewards that they used.
Yeah.
And it was just in text. So I said down below, hey, can you spit that out as a table? And Boom. It did instantly. Perfectly.
It's like a day's work, right? Like you would have to have an analyst or researcher do a day's work. It's incredible. And
then I just screenshotted that and I made it an exhibit in my blog post. You also said
thank you?
Well,
and then it was like delightful back to you? I mean, this is a road. This is a literal road to you being a kind human being. Like all the money that you've spent on therapy and just trying coaching to be nice to people, you're just nice naturally to robots. This gives me hope.
Sacks is in a good mood today. I don't know why you're instigating him.
He's laughing. Come on, it's fun. You have to admit it's funny, Sacks saying thank you to the AI. Perfect.
This is confirmatory of what we know. David wants to live in a set of highly transactional relationships, ideally with a machine, who can then eventually help him make him money.
Can I ask you a question, sincerely, Sacks? What did you enjoy more? Working with your team of humans on this or working with ChatGPT? Which one was more enjoyable for you, just personally?
Well, I think they both were. I would say that the human contributions were essential. So
Okay. But what did you enjoy more?
It's not about enjoyment. It's just, it's about, this is just a job to get done, but it definitely sped things up enormously. I personally find the hardest part of writing a blog is when you're staring at that blank sheet of paper and just having to spit out the first 1,000 words.
Yes.
And it's just so time consuming to do that. But again, if you start with the first draft, even if it's not very good, then you can just edit it and it speeds things up a lot.
Yeah. It's great for ideation.
But the contributions of people in my firm were important.
Yeah.
I actually trusted it. I know that you probably should fact check it in a way because it can hallucinate, but the things that we're saying made so much sense to me that I didn't think it was hallucinating.
Well, this is a great moment to pivot into what OpenAI did with plugins. These came fast and furious this week, and a bunch of folks who had, started verticalized ChatGPT-based projects, MVPs were like, oh, maybe my project MVP is now dead because Instacart, OpenTable, Shopify, Slack, Zapier, and Zapier, obviously, if then this, then that, is a very wide-ranging tool that allows you to connect APIs from a multitude of sources. And what this all lets you do at the end of the day is have ChatGPT ping one of these sources, just like an app might do or some custom software might do, ping the API and return data. So, hey, what tables are open on OpenTable? Maybe Shopify, find me things to buy in this category, etc. And so people have started building little scripts. We used to call these, when Magic Leap was out, internet agents. And the concept of a software agent, that's existed for a long time, actually, in computer science. I'm sure Friedberg will give us some examples of that. But also ChatGPT can now use a browser. So that means you can get around the dated nature of the content in the corpus. Somebody did things like, hey, build me a meal plan, book me a reservation for Friday night in OpenTable, source other ingredients and buy it for Saturday night on Instacart, and then use something like Wolfram Alpha to, calculate the calories, etc. So when you saw all this drop, Sacks, what did you think in terms of the opportunity for startups and to build these intelligent agents, things that will do if this, then that, or just background tasks over time, and you could actually leave them running?
Yeah. I think this is the most important developer platform since the iPhone and the launch of iOS in the App Store, and I would argue maybe ever in our industry, certainly since the beginning of the internet. I think there was a question when ChatGPT launched on November 30th and people started playing with it in December, what exactly OpenAI's product strategy was going to be. Was this just like a proof of concept or a demo? And they even kind of called it like a demo. And initially it looked like what their business model was going to be was providing an intelligence API that other websites, other applications could incorporate. And we saw some really cool demos like that Notion demo of other applications incorporating AI capabilities. And so initially it looked like what OpenAI was going to be was more like Stripe, where in the same way that Stripe made payments functionality available very easily through a developer platform, they were going to make AI capabilities available through their developer platform. And then I think a funny thing happened on the way to this announcement, which is they became the fastest growing application of all time. I'm talking about ChatGPT. Over 100 million users in 2 months. Nobody else has ever done that before. I think it took the iPhone, 2 years plus. Gmail, Google, those products all took, I think, well over a year. So this became the fastest growing site of all time. And I think with plugins, what they're indicating is that they will become a destination site. This is not just a developer platform. This is a destination site. And through plugins, they are now incorporating the ability to basically, anything you could do through an application, you will now be able to do through a plugin. You'll just tell ChatGPT what you want done. If you say, hey, book me a plane ticket on this date, it will go into Kayak's plugin and do that. You say, book me a plane ticket and then an Airbnb for this trip.
So the promise of Siri and Alexa realized, because those were very rigid, they had no intelligence, right, Friedberg? If you wanted Siri to do something specific like use Waze or to go get you an OpenTable, it needed to be pretty specific, and it didn't have any kind of natural language model behind it. So this is taking existing APIs and putting a natural language layer in front of it, which makes it, perform a little more naturally. Is that what we're seeing here, Friedberg?
I think it provides access to a corpus of data and a suite of services that are not well integrated into a search or chat interface anywhere today. So, knowing what restaurants have what seats available is in a closed service. It's in a data warehouse operated by OpenTable. And now what OpenTable can do is provide an API into that data via an interface, and they can allow ChatGPT to make a request to figure that data out, to give a response to a user, where they can ultimately benefit from transacting and allowing a service. This closes the loop between search and commerce in a way that Google cannot and does not do today. And I think that's what makes it very powerful. We've seen this attempted in a number of important ways in the last couple of years with Alexa and Apple Home and Google Home kind of integration via the chat services that they offer, where you speak to the device. But the deep integration that's possible now and the natural language way that you can go from the request all the way through to the transaction is what makes this so extremely powerful. And I think, the points I made a few weeks ago when we first talked about, search, having so many searches that are done where the human computer interface presents a table or presents a chart or presents a shopping list in a matrix, that's what makes search such a defensible product, I think could theoretically be completely obviated or destroyed with an interface like this, where you can write the ability for ChatGPT or whatever the core centralized service is to actually present results in a table, in a matrix, in an interface, in a shopping list, and actually close the transaction loop. It's really disruptive to things like commerce providers. It's really disruptive, some of these commerce platforms. It's really disruptive to a lot of different industries, but also introduces a lot of real opportunity to build on top of that capability and that functionality to rewrite and ultimately make things easier and better for consumers on the internet.
What do you think, Chamath? You're looking at this, and it seems to be moving at a very fast pace. Over 100 million users. They put a business model on it already, $20 a month. They have a secondary business model of, hey, use the API and we'll charge you for usage. And then you layer on what Zapier and If This Then That had already sort of established in the world, which is APIs, but nobody ever really wanted to write scripts. So that seemed to be the blocker. You go into Zapier, If This Then That, it's for 5% of the audience, people who want to customize stuff, people who want to tinker. But this seems to now, with the ChatGPT chat interface, open it up to a lot of people. So is this super significant, or is this a commodity product that 10 people will have if we're sitting here next year on All In episode 220?
I think you are asking the exact right question. And you used a great term. Like in poker, if there are 3 hearts on the board and you have the ace of hearts, you have what's called the nut blocker, right? Which means that nobody else, even if anybody else has a flush, they never have the best flush. And if flush is the best hand, there's a lot of ways that you can manipulate the pot and eventually win the pot because you have that ace of hearts and nobody else has it. The concept of blocker, I think, is very important to understand here, which is what are the real blockers for this capability to not be broadly available? So I think you have to segregate. You have the end user destination, you have the language model, and then you have the third-party services. And so if you ask the question, what is the incentive of the third-party service? Well, the shareholders of a travel site, right? They're not interested in doing an exclusive deal with any distribution endpoint. They want their services integrated as broadly as possible, right? So I think the answer for the service providers is just like they build an app for iOS and for Google, and if they could have justified it, they would have built an app for a gaming console. They can,
or the
they
Windows
should,
phone.
they would, they do, right? So that's going to get commoditized and broadly available. I think on the LLM side, I think we've talked about this. Everybody's converging on each other. In fact, there was an interesting article that was released that said that there was a handful of Google engineers that quit because apparently Bard was actually learning on top of ChatGPT, which they felt was either illegal or unethical or something, right? So the point is, I think we've talked about this for a while, but all of these models will converge in the absence of highly unique data, right? What I've been calling these white truffles. So if you can hoard white truffles, your model will be better. Otherwise, your model will be the same as everybody else's model. And then you have the distribution endpoints, of which there are many whose economic incentives are very high, right? So Facebook doesn't want to just sit around and have all this traffic go to ChatGPT. They want to be able to enable Instagram users and WhatsApp users and Facebook users to interact through Messenger, what have you. Obviously, Google has many hundreds of billions of reasons to defend their territory. So I think all of this to me just means that these are really important use cases. As an investor, I think it's important to just stay a little patient because it's not clear to me that there are any natural blockers. But I do think that David's right, that it's demonstrating a use case that's important, but it's still so early. We are 6 weeks in.
Yeah, I tell you, I think there's a couple of great blockers here, or there's going to be an M&A bonanza for Silicon Valley. If you look at certain data sets, Reddit, Stack Overflow for programming, and Quora, these things are going to be worth a fortune. And to be able to buy those or get exclusive licenses to those, if you're Google Bard or if you're ChatGPT, that could be a major difference maker. Twitter's data set, obviously. And then you look at certain tools like Zapier and if this and that. They've spent a decade building the sort of, Meta API. That would be an incredible blocker. I think this is going to be like a balkanization
I'll be honest
so many
with you,
oil sources.
Zapier already did it for free. They did a plugin for free.
Exactly. I was just going to say, I don't think these are not blockers. I don't think this is the ace of hearts on a flush board. I don't think so. I think that these things are really interesting assets. They are definitely truffly in nature, but they may not be the 10-pound white truffle from Alba that we're looking for.
But on the M&A side, don't you think this would be like incredible?
No, but the only reason I say that again is it is just so early. Like in the text, I mentioned this to you guys. I remember, and Sacks and I were in the middle of this. We were both right at the beginning of social networking. Sacks started Genie. I was in the middle of AIM. And all of a sudden, we saw Reed start SocialNet. Then we saw Friendster get started. Then we saw MySpace get started. And you have to remember, when you look back now, 20 years later, the winner was the 7th company, which was Facebook. Not the first, not the second. It was the 7th, which started 2.5 years properly after the entire Web 2.0 phenomenon started.
Yeah. Same with search, by the way, where Google was probably 20th to the scene.
Yeah, Excite, Lycos.
If you want to be a real student of business history, I'll just say something that's more meta, which is if there's something that I've learned on the heels of this SVB fiasco, is that there is an enormous amount of negative perception of Silicon Valley, and frankly, a lot of disdain for VCs and prognosticating technologists, right? And I think that
So you mean this podcast?
I think we have to be very careful. Yeah, and I do think that we are an example of that because we are the bright, shiny object of the people that were successful. And the broad makeup of America thinks that we're not nearly as smart as we all think we are. And after all of this money that's been burned in crypto land and NFTs and all of this Web3 nonsense, to yet again whip up the next hype cycle, I think doesn't serve us well. So I do think there's something very important here, but I think if we want to maintain reputational capital through this cycle, because government will get involved much faster in this cycle, I think it's important to just be methodical and thoughtful, iterate, experiment, but it's too early to call it, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely too early to call.